I love this show. I seriously love this show. There have been 3 straight weeks of nothing but successful episodes that continue to blow away any and all expectations set by the previous one. Each time I see the ending to an episode, I go into the next one with all sorts of possible predictions, and every single time I'm surprised by something that I never even expected to occur. This episode is split into 2 halves, one that's heavily story driven and focused on Jack's recovery, and the other being centered around another encounter with the assassins that have continued to track him down since they last met. This episode picks up almost immediately where episode 93 left off, with Jack tumbling down a river while bleeding out from the stab wound he received back during his battle with the Daughters of Aku. The first half of this episode tells the story of Jack's survival following the encounter, in which he ends up finding shelter in a cave to try and recover. I admire this segment of the episode because it shows how tough Jack really is. It highlights his ability to take a beating, as he is seen continuing forward despite having this blade jammed up into his side for the majority of his travel time. And the moment when he attempts to remove the blade from his flesh is easily one of the most gruesome things I have ever witnessed. The sheer combination of blood oozing out of his side and the agonizing groans that Jack lets out is enough to make almost anyone squirm. The sheer amount of blood used in this episode is far beyond anything I ever expected, but the best thing about it is that it's not just there to show his weakness. It's used as imagery, such as the scene where Jack stumbles upon this cave, or when he's seen sitting alone in the dark looking up at the wolf. And this comes into the example of his inner struggle with his ethical ideals when they come to life in the form of his inner self once again. Only this time, his image is more deranged and even a little maniacal. This hallucination asks him questions like if he enjoyed the killing or if he even wanted the assassins to kill him. Like he said in the last episode, Jack just thought they were nuts and bolts. Up until this point, the only villains he's ever deliberately killed, in quotation marks, were robots. This was the very first time Jack has ever taken a human life, and as a result, he spends his entire time in the cave hesitating on the values of his own morality. This is further signified by the flashback sequence in which he witnesses his father kill several men when their coach is attacked. It shows that even as a child, Jack was confused as to whether or not killing is the right thing to do, but when he remembers his father's words during that same sequence, he finally figures out what he needs to do. Remember the wolf from the last episode? Well, it turns out he survived, and he comes to Jack's aid when he needs it the most, almost as though the two are interconnected somehow. Whether this creature represents another variation of his inner self or is meant to be symbolized as a fellow warrior experiencing similar struggles, it's no question that the two form a memorable bond right from the get-go. Both of them are seen helping each other out as they spend quality time healing from their battle scars in the cave. The wolf hunts for food while Jack runs the fire, the two huddle together for warmth during the cold winter nights. They all around make for an awesome tag team that had perfect chemistry together. My absolute favorite moment between the two, however, happens when Jack and the wolf are attempting to heal their wounds. It shows that, even in desperate times, the show can still find instances where a spot of humor can be uplifting. When their time in the cave is finally over and they've completed their healing process, the wolf decides to leave and carry on doing its own thing while Jack stays to think about his next course of action. I was kinda hoping we'd get to see the two team up in combat, but I guess they have their own separate agendas, so it's not a huge loss. Again, Jack is seen thinking about his father's words and comes to the ultimate conclusion that he must hide from himself no longer, thus he sets out to engage the assassins following his trail. The second half of this episode shifts focus over to what the daughters have been doing this entire time, that being tracking Jack down so they can end him once and for all. This sequence following the daughters through their hunt for the samurai shows just how sheltered they really were as children. They were trapped in darkness training for the day they could finally kill this samurai in honor of Aku, so now that they're getting to experience the outside world, everything appears so alienating to them. This is especially apparent during their encounter with the two deer, as they are uncertain to the overall nature of said creatures. They even believe the buck to be some entity of Aku because of the shape of his antlers, further cementing just how isolated these girls really were from the real world. After some time, they stumble upon Jack in the forest where they prepare to do combat with him, but before they begin, Jack offers them the choice to leave and live or stay and meet their destiny. So it should come as no surprise to people by now that I love the fight with Shinobi the Shadow Warrior from Season 4 because of the contrast between using light and darkness. Well, this episode goes back to the exact same idea of Jack using the light to his advantage, only this time it being in the form of snow. And boy did I love this entire sequence. I also appreciate that the dimensions of this area aren't forgotten during this chase. As Jack and the daughters run through the blank canvas, small instances of a tree branch or another obstacle can be seen overlapping the characters, so clearly the animators are still aware of their surroundings. During the opening of the fight, Jack manages to kill 3 of the daughters right off the bat without even blinking an eye, accentuating his determination to save himself and defeat the menace trying to take his life. It only gets better when he manages to lead the 3 remaining daughters to the edge of a cliff, where Jack proceeds to take them down one by one using some of the most brutal killing blows I have ever seen. And finally, when only one of the daughters remains, Jack manages to remove her mask, revealing it to be none other than Ashi. Now I won't lie, I had a feeling she would be playing a larger role compared to her sisters, considering the fact that she was the only character to be given a name, so this didn't come as much of a surprise to me. But this doesn't take anything away from the episode as a whole because it's still solid throughout. The episode ends with Ashi falling off of the cliff once Jack releases the chain keeping her hanging, and pretty soon Jack follows suit a la Wile E. Coyote. And with that, 3 episodes have been completed. I've noticed that each consecutive episode leaves me wanting to see the next one even more than the last, which should come as a sign that the season just keeps getting better and better as the story continues. I mean, that was one heck of a cliffhanger ending if I ever saw one.
Watch out.